Okay, well, we're going to get started here in just a minute. And okay, so good morning, everybody. And let's see here. So today we're going to do our standard Central New Mexico updates. And of course, first and foremost, our deep dive topic for today is all about how the City of Albuquerque is going to be able to reopen in the context of Phase 1. And so the city is prepared for this. We know how to go about it. Those are all good things. And also, though, it's going to take a little bit of time. So we're going to talk about some of the challenges and expectations around all sorts of things, from our zoo to our bus system and things like that. So let me begin with a couple of our updates, and then we're also going to hear from our COO and our CAO on different aspects of the Phase 1 reopening plan. Then we also do need to sign an updated emergency order, so we're going to do that at the end as well. So let's see, to start out with, let me mention a couple of things. There has been a grassroots effort at Sandia National Labs that has raised $245,000 for New Mexico's tribal communities. Thanks so much, Sandia Labs, for that, and great work on helping out our neighbors out on the reservations. So, also, again, these are all kind of unrelated, but some other snippets from our Joint Information Center. The Albuquerque FBI Division will host a live Twitter chat focused on the coronavirus and related scams and frauds Friday, May 15th at 10 a.m. So FBI agents are going to take your questions on Twitter. And again, that is at 10 a.m. May 15th, and you can look at FBI Albuquerque on Twitter and hashtag AskQuestionsFBI. Hashtag AskQuestionsFBI. So with that, we have a lot of material to go over today with respect to where the city is at. And so I do want to transition to our deep dive topic here. Before I do that, I do want to mention State Parks just came out and announced that on May 15th, there's going to be another phased reopening of 9 additional state parks. You can check out their website for a list of those parks. Okay, so let's talk about Albuquerque. Right now, I think there's some important basic questions that we want to answer that everyone has. And, there's some basics like, if I can I go to work? And so we'll talk about that. And then it's also, is there a safe place for my kids to go this summer? And how is that working? We're going to talk about that. And also, how safe is our city? How are we doing in terms of corona and staying safe right here in the Duke City? So that's what I want to touch on before I hand it over to our team for some details around this. And so firstly, with respect to going back to work, want to mention to folks that we want to mitigate the impact of the corona pandemic, and so we're prepared to reopen local government and government services and help businesses reopen in a careful, phased manner. So we've been planning for how to do this, and so we believe we know how to do this, and we're going to also talk about sort of when we can do this. Of course, the state announced that fundamentally all retail will be opening at can open at 25%, and big box stores remain at 20%. And houses of worship are at 10%, and entertainment venues and services, indoor malls, theaters, and salons, again, still closed. So, of course, that's going to be the same in the city of Albuquerque. Now, here in the city, we're trying to step up to try and make it a little bit easier for businesses. So our fire marshal, who has been, one of the harder working folks during the time of Corona, we have prepared this placard. This is going to walk every single business in the city of Albuquerque through the percentage of occupancies and how much you can allow. So if you have questions when you're at a business, look for this or ask for it if you really want to see it. But this is required by city law for all businesses to have. So you're going to be able to know that straight up, and you can see the different percentages there. And here's an example right there. So our fire marshal is going to be busy working on this throughout Albuquerque. And again, this is set up to guide us through different phases. So when we go to 75% or 50%, we don't have to redo this. So this is basically going to be the new occupancy load certificate for the city of Albuquerque. I want to remind folks, this does impact tens of thousands of businesses. So this might seem like a small thing, but it's not. And our fire marshal's office is working very hard to get this out and updated so that everyone has it. Okay, now a couple of other items that we want to go over. First off, city services and facilities like city buildings, cultural services, we're all going to open in step with the state guidance. Now, we want to ask for folks' patience on this. We're going to go over it in a little bit more detail, but I'll just use the zoo as an example. You can't just turn on the zoo, so especially when you have occupancy load limits. So as we announced Monday, we have a way to do this. So we're excited that we are going to be able to open the zoo in a limited format in June. But we have to set up the ticketing process, we got to set up the queuing, we got to set up the traffic flow, we got to bring all our staff back, and we got to train the staff in corona safe practices. So all of that now we are liberated to do, and we're excited to do that, but it's going to take a few weeks before we'll be ready again to open those doors. But we know what to do, and so stay tuned for when exactly that's going to be able to happen. Now, that process is similar, albeit not quite as complicated, for all city buildings. So as a reminder, we have, including temporary workers, about 6,000 employees. We're going to be going over the regulations and rules for all those employees, but also for our public-facing buildings, including our libraries and even City Hall and so forth. So again, we plan to reopen in step with state guidance for phase one. But it's not going to happen overnight, so you're going to have to give us a few weeks to map all of this out for our different city services and so forth. Now, second question, a little bit related, where can my kids have a safe place to go if I have to go back to work? And as a reminder, this is something we spent a lot of time on Monday. So again, we've mapped this process out. The state has given us very good guidance that was aligned with our game plan. So nothing really has changed from what we announced on Monday. But want to remind folks the fundamental concept, right, as we reopen, we have to think about childcare. And so the concept is you can't really reopen businesses without reopening childcare. It's pretty obvious reasons. But with school being out, that means also all of these summer programs. So again, we got good guidance from the state that is aligned with what we were planning on at the city. And so we're going to have limited options available, but options available so people can actually go back to work and their kids can be somewhere safe. So we're going to touch on that more in a little bit. And again, all of these criteria for our kids, all these programs go hand in hand with the guidance from the governor. And they also have, all the ratios, 5-to-1 ratios, COVID safe practices. It's a different kind of summer, but we are able to offer actually thousands of opportunities for our kids to be in a safe place if their parents need to work. Okay, and then let me talk a little bit about, are we safe? And in terms of our going around town and how we're doing this, of course, I want to talk about where we're at, with respect to the state. And this is difficult because, let me preface this by saying that we know in Albuquerque we are, again, the major urban metropolitan area for about 1,000 square miles. So while we obviously have, in many ways, we're unique in that we have this, whether it's the number of hospitals or the airport or all the commercial businesses or the skyscrapers, all of these things that we know, they exist in central New Mexico, right here in Albuquerque. But we also know that that means that people from all around the state come to Albuquerque for all of those services. And so we know that we are in many ways very connected to other parts of the state, but also have unique challenges because of that connection. So if you look at this, what I want to share with you primarily on this slide is that I think the good news is, we're in a very good place right now for Bernalillo County. And so that's just because that's sort of measured. We go to the metro area. You can see that, this last week, this is our spread rate. So again, this is sort of the R squared, but it's the number of people, if one person's infected, statistically, how many other people might be infected. And so, we've been looking for this key number based on the guidance from the state of 1.15. That's our target. And so we know, look at last week, we were 1.16, almost there, and now we're at 1.09. So this does give us confidence, and also I want to appreciate everyone in the metro area in Albuquerque for doing what it takes to drive these numbers down. whether it's getting tested, whether it's quarantining, whether it's wearing a face mask, washing your hands, social distancing. All of these things are making reopening phase one possible. And the great news, especially because we have so much healthcare facilities here and testing facilities here, this is a really good thing for the Metro. So good job, Metro. Obviously, we've got to keep it up to get to phase two. So we're going to continue to watch and make data-driven decisions based on this. But I also want to highlight on this slide a fundamental concept. Right now, the good news is that the Metro is very aligned with the state of New Mexico on all of these orders. Now, we have reminded folks, and we continue to remind folks, that may not always be the case. I want to highlight Colorado and Denver, for example. Denver right now has much stricter rules than the state of Colorado. And the good news is because of statistics like this, we don't have to do that in Albuquerque right now. We can move in step with the state. And in some cases, when there's an absence of guidance, we can make our own decisions for what's best for the metro area. But I do want to highlight that, if for whatever reason these numbers look reverse, where we're in a much worse situation, then obviously the city is going to take our health very seriously and move in a stricter fashion. But again, right now we don't have to do that. And so thank you to Albuquerque for not putting us in that position. And so I don't envy the mayor of Denver at all in this situation. And actually we do talk. So it's a good thing that right now Albuquerque is actually performing so well. Now, of course, it's very difficult for our friends and family in the Northwest. And so that's why you see the state order being a little bit different for them. And as we look at our statistics, I want to remind folks that even though this is a key number for us, we have to think about the connection between us and the rest of the state. So even if our numbers look good, we might have to take special precautions because we know medically right now there are many, many people from the Northwest, hundreds, that are being in our hospitals right now. And we always do that. That's what Albuquerque has always done, especially through UNMH, and we continue to do that. So we're in good shape right now. And we're very aligned with the state. That's good news. Just a reminder that, down the road, we hope that's always the case. But if it's not, like Denver, we'll take our own actions. Okay, so let me talk about philosophically how we're going through all of our city services. So let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. And want to share that, again, we're using, Sarita Nair, our CAO, is going to talk about kind of the philosophy we're using. What I want to remind folks is what is already open and continues to be open. So just a reminder, all our police and fire stations are open. And our emergency child care for essential workers remains open. This is through our community centers. And there's different variations of this if you're in need. Solid waste and our convenience centers continue to be open. Senior meal sites, again, 15,000 a week right now that we're feeding our seniors. Health and social service centers, this is sort of the place of last resort, whether it's trying to access services or get an emergency food box or rental assistance. There are 4 of them, and they continue to be open, 1 in each quadrant of the city. Key Abq Ride Routes. Remember, we kept our bus system open because of that emergency transport for medical or shopping and so forth. And our routes that are open have been quite busy, and so they're being supported by those helper buses. We're going to talk about how transit will be reopening when Lawrence Rael comes to speak on that. Reminder also, our small business office, our film office, our economic development department, all open by phone and by appointment. Also a reminder, the planning department is basically open under a modified fashion, continues to be. That means fire marshal plan reviews. Anyone who's opening a new building knows they need this. It also means construction permitting, and it also means all the different boards and commissions associated with decision making for those entities. Animal welfare continues to be open now for both adoption and surrender, but by appointment or in case of emergency. And again, we'll be phasing that in. You'll hear more about that now, but this is just already what has been open and continues to be open. And our key sort of civilian oversight board for the police, key boards and commissions. Also our drive-up Wi-Fi now in 70 locations all over the city. If you need the internet, we can provide it for you from 8 to 2. So hop on the website. I think we're fortunate to say that there's ample capacity there. So if you're in need of internet, please take advantage of that. And of course, our Office of Civil Rights and Consumer Protection, open and processing complaints to make sure that no one's getting taken advantage of in this time. Okay, so I think with that, what we're going to do is get into how we're dealing with city employees, city services, and city facilities, and all of the intersection between all of our residents and those services. And so to talk through those items, we're going to begin with our CAO, Sarita Nair. Sarita, come on up. I have to grab one piece of paper. Sorry, hold on 1 second. Right there. Okay.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor, for that introduction. Before I start going into the details on this, I do just want to remind everyone that just like the closure phase and the preparation phase, this phase 1 reopening is going to require a lot of patience and understanding from our employees, from the public. There are going to continue to be lines to get into places. You're going to have to maybe wait in line to get into an elevator. Things may open and then they may need to close again. And frustration is going to be part of that process. But when we talk about all being in this together, sometimes that means we're all frustrated and grumpy together. And we need to show each other kindness and grace and respect throughout this time. That's really the only way we're going to get through it. It would be easier actually just to remain closed, but we know that's not an option for our city because number one, it's not an option for a lot of our workforce. Folks can just not afford to stay home if they're allowed to go back to work. Second, sadly, home is not always safe. So we need a place for kids to go where they can be seen and get access to services. And third, home is not always healthy. If you've lived in a cramped apartment where the only option for fresh air is opening that window, you know what this is like. We need to have those open spaces and those other places for folks to actually be in a healthier environment than home might be. So next I'm going to talk about how we put together the reopening plan, and this will be available on our website. It's a 49-page document that our department heads and division managers worked really hard to put together. And they are just an amazing team who have pulled together in really amazing ways for this crisis. But we basically had a 3-step process, and I'm going to walk you through that because some of our folks at home may be going through the same set of questions on how to reopen their workplace or their retail shop, and we just want to show sort of how we did it. Our first stop is always the CDC guidelines, and those are available through the internet. The Department of Health has nicely, of the state has nicely divided those up by types of workplace. Those are going to give you a lot of clear instruction about COVID-safe practices, how to clean your workstations, what to do if someone tests positive, how to keep people in small groupings so that contact tracing is easy to accomplish. That's the first step, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. There's actually broad consensus on how to do this properly. The second thing we did was sort of a 30,000-foot risk analysis, and that's what I call the blob chart that's up here. That's what this blob chart is all about. We took the simple framework for assessing risk developed by Johns Hopkins, and the state is also using this as well. It looks at the intensity of contact. So, are people jostling each other? Or are they sitting far away from each other? The number of contacts, so how many people tend to be in a space, and then the potential for modification. So what are the controls we can put up? In my local grocery store, they now have these plastic guards between the cashier and the customer. That's an easy modification to make. So those are easy modifications. Other places are more difficult to modify. And then we kind of grouped from a 30,000-foot level our places, our programs, and our office buildings and plotted them on this chart. And so, towards the bottom, right, are the things that are already open, parks and open spaces, for example, where you have not that many people per square foot, you have people spread out, and you also can easily make those small changes that need to be made. At the way top right corner of the chart, you're going to have the things that are also going to be last to open. So a large convention in the convention center where you have hundreds of people sitting next to each other in seminars, we're probably not going to see that for a few months. And so that is how we group them in the big picture. And then the third step was we did a deep dive, program by program, space by space. And I'm going to give you some examples of how we did that here. But it really does require just sort of walking through a day or a week in the life of your space or your program and thinking of all the ways that people are together, the ways that people may make contact and the things they may make contact with, and making sure that you have those COVID-safe practices in each of those situations. Now, if you need help, you should definitely feel free to look at our version of this on the internet, look at those websites with the CDC guidelines, or call our small business office. They are available at 505-768-3730. They'd be happy to walk you through this 3-step process and help you think through it. So what's next for our city facilities? So we're going to move to the next slide. Great. So all of the material we're going through, you should know the basic premises. There's always going to be limited capacity in accordance with the state guidelines. There's always going to be those COVID-safe practices and measures in place, and there aren't going to be any special events at this time. So that's sort of the general rule for these spaces. But starting on Monday, in accordance with the state's guidelines, office buildings will begin to reopen to more employees and to the public on a limited basis. Now, there is going to be screening, which those of you who are in the room probably had to go through just to get in the building right now. That's a series of questions. Have you traveled out of state? Have you been in contact with someone who is COVID positive? And then there's some temperature taking and, of course, waiting. So each department is going to be in contact with our employees to talk about whether and when they'll be coming back to work if they do work on site. As we have been, we will continue to communicate with employees through each department director and division manager to make sure that you have really clear expectations. We'll be doing that over the course of the rest of the day and tomorrow. Parks facilities, so the shooting range, the Horsemen's Complex, racket sports facility, the air park, open space visitor center, those are all going to begin to reopen over the course of the next week or so. But here's an example of how we had to think through some of the details. So we know we can open the shooting range, but then we had to think through, okay, there's the firing line at the shooting range. And so the staff made the decision to say, okay, we're only going to have 12 tables open, and there are only going to be 2 people allowed per table. It's really that level of detail that you have to think through as you're going through reopening. Those limited services like the small business office, film office, solid waste, transit, and permitting, those will all start to become available in person on an appointment basis over the course of the next week. And environmental health is going to be ramping up in-person inspections, in addition to continuing that responsive enforcement and expanding that work as well. Then moving into the first week of June, you're going to start to see some of our outdoor cultural facilities open with time ticketing. Tingley Beach, free, always has been, hopefully always will be. That is, though, a space where we have to control the number of people who are out there. So there'll be a system of ticketing entrances as a way to sort of gate the number of people who are there. But again, it'll continue to be free. The biopark, the zoo, the aquarium, the Botanic gardens, the outdoor spaces there will begin to open. The indoor spaces like the Bugarium and the hugely popular penguin exhibit will not be open until phase 2 or 3. You might see a week for members only, just so we can test out some of these controls that they've been working on, but it's going to be a very different experience. You're going to get a ticket that allows you entrance at a certain time, and then you're going to have sort of one direction of traffic, and you're going to be asked to move along so that we don't create mass gatherings in front of the primate exhibit or one of the other more popular exhibits. And libraries and indoor cultural facilities are also going to start to open in June. So here's another example of the things we had to think through in great detail. So in libraries, we're installing protective shields at the customer service desk. We're planning on 1 week of training prior to reopen so that everybody who works in the library has infectious disease control training. There won't be, in the first phase, public computers. There won't be seating. There will not be furniture. There will not be sitting on the floor. There will not be in-person programming or meeting room bookings. So phase 1 is very much about let's start to open the space and see what kind of issues arise. And then in phase 2 or 3, you'll see that full range of services become available again. And so, we don't, again, want to project too far into the future because we are following state guidelines, but in phases 2 and 3, we do expect a gradual expansion of capacity openings and then the lessons that we in. The governor yesterday emphasized that these reopenings are not an invitation to start leaving the house if you don't need to. I think that that's a really important piece of this. I would ask you to think of other people who might need these spaces. So, you know, if you have a backyard and you don't take one of those limits park or park, maybe you stay until a later house, because I guarantee you there are some families who don't have backyards or places to go right now who really need that open space. If you have kids at home, maybe consider waiting until later phase to go to Tingley Beach, because I guarantee you there's a family with special needs kids who just do a peaceful place where they need spots more than you do. Let them have it. And same thing with the library. Limited in the library. If you have a kid at home, just use Kindle for a couple months, because there are people in our community who know the library is more spaces. That's the mix of facilities and services reopened for transportation, which Lauren. But I also want to touch on the testing. So as we move through these phases, we are going to have clear policies on COVID-safe practices. We are going to work towards that 25% capacity return. We updated our sick leave policies early on, and those are going to remain in place, but there's going to be more shifting of specific employees back into the workplace based on the department's needs and their plans. If somebody tests positive, we are going to use the procedures that we've been using in the facilities that have been open. So all personnel will be evacuated. Assigned personnel will be instructed to work remotely from home or alternate assigned locations. Personnel with direct exposure to the ill employee will work remotely and be tested. Then they'll come back if they test negative. And the department or the area will not be staffed until a contractor has come in and done the deep cleaning in accordance with COVID-safe practices. We have great materials in our report on that. And of course, we continue to support our employees with very progressive leave policies. So moving on to slide 7, I'm not going to go into detail on the summer programming because I know that we went over this in detail just a few days ago in that briefing, but again, we're prepared to enter phase 1, 5-to-1 ratios. We worked very closely with the governor's office in developing these as they did in developing their criteria, and we feel confident that we're going to be able to comply. In phase 1, you'll see the list is on certain places on our website, and then if we go to slide 8, there's a list of key dates and websites and that sort of thing, so I won't reiterate that all now, but of course if you have questions, feel free to raise those at the end. Finally, I want to touch on enforcement because we have been getting a lot of questions about the city and enforcing different that work. Since the beginning, we have working together to make sure that we're meeting the right level. So we have, of course, the Albuquerque Police have the Fire Marshal Office, Code Enforcement, the Planning Department, and Environmental Health Department, especially on restaurant inspections. They're going to continue to work together. We're going to continue to follow the lead of the state police. But the whole time, our philosophy has been education first, and continue to be as we move into the next phases. To give you what it means, about 195 that we've gotten the March, about half the folks now were complaints. The other half patient. Of those almost 900 complaints, doing warning and 2 citations. Finding is tools, right? Education. We're grateful for that. That's our emphasis. Not going out to individuals or this is an education for, and they did members of the are to now meaning just the class cover. Please drop those off at subs. They're going to be please cover for general public counter. That's it. As outreach to the community, just give these face cover. Please feel free. So first, but of course, to disturb peace. Needs to behave respectfully. Will be involved in crisis and team that is mental health component because this is a called mental health issues. That turn it or
Okay, so we're going to continue to go through the department. There's been lots of to isotopes, and so our CEO, Lawrence Rael, to that.
Thanks, Mayor. I think it's really super recognized that the government provides such a service to the and service usually deliver them. We community staff that we're being conscientious and all the requirements. So as talked about patient and the fact that frustration may be part of our day-to-day work here for a while, that it's also about all of us working together. So with that, as we look at reopening our transit system, it's really important to recognize that we have already had our services, at least a Saturday service in place for several weeks here as we began to get closer and closer to dealing with this issue of COVID-19. The good news is that as the mayor indicated, because of the work of the citizens of our region, of our community here, we are now able to begin to open up that service. So in the next couple of weeks, because of our need to restructure our bids for drivers, we will begin to open up the transit system in mid-June. That will include also reopening the art program and having the art buses run up and down Central. We have taken advantage of the, if you will, of the delay in the service or in shutting down the service for a period of time and have put in additional safety measures in the corridor, adding pin curves and adjusting signs, etc., to make art safer. We talked about this a while back, that taking advantage of the opportunities that COVID provides as to maybe silver lining to get some things done in the community, and this has been one of them. So now, as art begins to ramp up in mid-June, and as our bus service begins to increase, we will be able to serve the community, especially those who are transit dependent. Another aspect of the transit system that's super important to recognize is that we need to make sure that we have social distancing within as we operate that service. That means that there may be helper buses associated with some of the corridors where we have a heavy transit, if you will, ridership. And that means that if we have a bus that is like an art bus that may carry 50 or 60 people or so, we will limit the number of folks in that particular bus, but there will be a bus right behind that bus to carry anyone else who might be at a platform or at a bus stop. This is part of the requirement, not only to have social distancing, but to ensure that both our drivers and the passengers and folks that use our system are having the best opportunity to use a safe system as we move through our day-to-day lives. So again, that it'll be coming up now mid-June. Talked a little bit about yesterday in a briefing. The airport obviously been open. We've continued now as things begin to lighten up in parts of the country. A lot more facility. Our retail will be open. 25% of them have been open a while, and will continue to open. Will have, if you will, food items as people go to the airport. The airport area was a very popular place. Mayor loves taking his children to go see the planes land. Is open now, so the folks can go with the family and sit in the car and watch planes land. Look, at this point in our life, we're looking for every opportunity to engage our children in a way that is safe, but also maybe get them out of the house a bit, etc. Additionally, we are looking at the Alvarado Transit Center, which is where our main operations for our Abq Ride will start to open up again. The little grill that serves food there will open up as well for to-go service. Our golf courses. Our golf courses just opened up recently. Now we're able to open up the retail shops in the golf courses at 25%, so that folks who are wanting to go get that new driver or that extra putter, etc., will now be able to at least start walking into these pro shops again at the 25% requirement. Other areas that in our public facilities where we have food courts, whether it's at the museums or at the biopark or at the zoo, etc. Again, we'll have opportunities for folks to go in and again to-go orders where the folks will basically rope off the areas. People can order their food, but they will can't sit inside the facility per se unless we get so that we don't violate the 25% rule. Again, those will be opening as well. Double Eagle 2 Airport will start opening their little small restaurant as well, and of course Double Eagle 2, like the main airport, has been open through the course of the pandemic. But obviously, as things begin to pick up, more and more services will be added there. I think it's important to recognize that for all of us in city government that provide services, we have been very, very conscientious about ensuring that the services that we're providing to the public, that we're doing in a safe and prudent manner. You see many of our folks out there who are, whether they're doing public inspections, like at restaurants or buildings, etc., but also our folks that are working out in inspecting construction sites, etc., making sure that they're wearing the appropriate protective, if you will, gear, their PPE, ensuring that they're socially distancing themselves from each other and doing their work to keep the city going and keeping it moving forward. I will say that innovative things that have happened through this course of this program actually, I think, have given rise for us to think about how the pandemic has given us some new opportunities to do some work. A good example of that is our refuse drivers. Look, we have many drivers that come in every morning at 5 o'clock to get on their trucks to go straight to picking up the refuse throughout the city, whether it's the commercial or residential program. One of the interesting things that we did is that normally they come in and they go to the locker room and they swap stories or what have you and get ready for the day. Well, because if one refuse driver is ill, and he could easily create a scenario where all of our refuse systems sort of comes to a halt because they all would have to be quarantined, etc. So what we did is we ended up now having them all go to their trucks. So they report directly to their trucks. The night before, our folks are cleaning the trucks and making sure that they're clean, etc., and sterilized. And now our operators just jump into the truck. Their orders are given to them by a phone mechanism that we've established, so that they all get the same information about what's going on today. They get information from the mayor and from the city, if you will, execs about what's happening with Corona. But then they get straight to their routes. That's created a great opportunity for more efficiency. They get out on the street quicker and they deliver the services in a much more efficient manner. Those are the kinds of little silver linings that you pick when you look at this and you have to reevaluate how you deliver services in totality. And I'm sure that in the private sector, a lot of those things have happened as well, and we've learned those lessons here at City Hall. A couple of things about coming into city buildings. Obviously, we're going to continue to have the, if you will, the screening in the front doors for all of our employees. That includes questions that Sarita just alluded to earlier, whether or not travel abroad, whether or not traveled out of the state, you've come in contact with COVID-19, etc. We're doing temperature, but that means the patient is required, especially very popular or facilities you have to do business, whether it's sole for action, coming in the city hall. Would recommend business city government can call in and make reservations, schedule a time to meet with our folks. It will relieve a lot of the frustration that you might otherwise encounter for walking if you're to city get some information, and that includes things like the county clerk information, especially as to the a lot of us call, make sure that you etc. help us process quicker and in line. All of our will report this as the guests that do this. And so those are things that. But decision. Of course, of evaluating how we deliver service. And if you next slide, have a list of all of programs. It's not fortunately to provide service for the coming year or the summer, I should say. The things that we example the yards market, such a popular to gather on because of the size to do that done before. So it goes back to the we for the last couple of weeks about a very things like some use it instead of do the old concerts, for example, based on the fact that there's the league to decision about whether isotopes through summer into the so what happened the mass gathering of as we programs united another very popular activity fall not only the leagues to make look gatherings and how that impacts those services. So it's part of the growing that we all have to learn to get accustomed to as it relates to this issue. But I will just say and reiterate what the both the mayor have said. You know, Albuquerqueans are bootcamp neighbors and a tremendous here the social distancing, the staying at home orders. Now as we move to the next phase, starting to open, it's going to still require all of us to be vigilant and to work together to ensure that we're able to continue to lower the curve, if you will, and to that's what we're doing every day. And we as a city and our employees and the way we manage to open up our services that is the most paramount in our mind, and that is that we're doing everything, opening services in an appropriate way that still helps us enjoy what we see and about humanity at the same time enjoy what is super, and that's about each living together and together. So,
thank you so much, Princeton. We know really lots of questions or things that we're working on with respect of the different programs, but we want to share with at least the last few all of the city. They're really a plan of how to reopen. So, really understand this Zoom app for faith and or employees. So we have that give Albuquerque in reopen plan to set up the state phase and all detailed answers you want to check there. The is go through the phases of reopening. Now, and it's time. We mentioned it takes all to be able to execute on this. It means that we've got to respect both the concept of home when you can, of distancing, but also of just patience with each other. It's not easy to do things like open facilities and the state guidelines, right? The easy way would be to not do any and just see you in the mall. We believe that we have an obligation to keep the city running, our safety running, and to continue to provide services we need for families and parents in need, folks who don't have alternatives when it comes to options for their kids or to even go for green space. That's our city great that to do even in the time of Corona. Let's do a couple of other before we take your questions. One small thing I mentioned in terms of Corona safe practices, we also are doing that we're trying to city respect contact tracing. So we asked, name and what's your things like what that's for. Nothing to do with invasion of privacy, any or annoying, no one from that, what it means it just helps our citizen out, and we have to do quarantine test procedure. It helps us trace, right, been in contact with, or so again, patients with sign-in all summer. And do things can easy, then we get information anyway. That's why our city apps are so important. So again, it's one of the save the phone and save showing up in person and paper for folks who don't have access to apps and the computer. If you have access to those, please, anything you are doing, use that, again, because it's going to help us all be safer when it comes to contact tracing. Okay, now let me do a couple of other items that we need to take care of. First, I want to, again, just reiterate that the good news is our city is very much in step with the state. We're aligned on where we're going. We're aligned on the phases. We're aligned on how to execute. And we really appreciate the cooperation and collaboration with the state, whether it's DOH or HSD or the governor or her office or all the gazillions of lawyers who are involved in all of this. We've been working very closely with them. And so I want to thank the state for that and also let folks know that we're in a very good situation in New Mexico because our largest city is moving in step with the state of New Mexico. And again, there are many states where that is not the case. And so that's a good thing. So to continue doing that, we need to update our emergency order. Ours was going to expire, I think, Sunday at midnight. So I'm going to assign, I think this is our 6th emergency order at this point. And basically all this does, it's actually our 5th correction on that. This is our 5th emergency order. This basically just aligns us with everything that the state went over. I did mention that, sometimes we move a little differently. So there are some subtleties in here about our transit department and buses. There's some things about we are being a little bit stricter on grocery stores in the city of Albuquerque. And so there are some nuances too about the airport and so forth that again, we'll continue to tweak within that fairway that the state gives us what we need to do as a city. And so those items are also in here. But by and large, we're very much aligned. And so I think we're all better off for that at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and sign this, and then we're going to move on to questions. And so as I sign this, this is, I believe, another 2-week extension. Just making sure I got that right. So again, this should set us on the same sort of wavelength. So we'll see what happens in 2 weeks with the state. We'll see what happens in 2 weeks with the city of Albuquerque. And we'll probably, I'm sure, have another version of this unless it's exactly the same as this one. So, all right, with that taken care of, want to mention that takeout yesterday was Sadie's and continuing to be enjoying the wide range of takeout options available in our town, and we're excited to have more. So with that, I think what I'm going to do is switch our question and answer period. So questions from the audience.
Answer just a clarification on small business on the 16th. Her question.
Yeah, so the question says open on the 16th. They are under the auspice of different guidelines we gave. So if it's presented, another.
Great. My next question comes from Rael. How is communication with the Mexico Department with Mayor in the city of Albuquerque? Are you aware of the changes before they have you can make in Albuquerque and
the question is, how much are we communication in a way happening? Specifically, this one was about the Department of Health, and the answer is just in a really good place. We are actually in a place where mayors and governors in interstate, they get along. We're in a great place. So we actually talk to them. I mean, I think literally daily. We are in, first off, communication on emergency spectrum, and self or our executive team communicating with each day. The heads up on the they're appropriate. Sometimes they're like, we're leaning this direction. What do you think? Sometimes they're, to go this ready. We in one of those ways, and that's the governor and I personally, which is appropriate for again the just of Albuquerque's proportional size states. Thing for all of us, and we're in touch at many levels on a daily basis.
Take you up. Come on out. Okay.
just wanted to add to Department Secretary. She has been responsible. I don't even understand how it's physically, but she returns calls, and it's just so important, especially now. Gives her a big thank you for extra effort to make sure that we always know what's going on.
I want to add in one other aspect of that too. We all have scientists. So remember, our city's fortunate enough, we do have an epidemiologist. We have healthcare professionals, right, doctors working out at our homeless shelter. So I also just want to reiterate that conversation happens medically and epidemiology, whatever that word is, as well. And so the city's lucky to have that input that, again, gets shared throughout the state, but also up to our executive team.
Question from Jessica Dyer at the Albuquerque Journal. Will the city require bus passengers to wear a mask on board?
The question is is about masks on buses. So for that, I'm going to ask our COO, Lawrence Rael, to come up.
So at this point, we are requiring, obviously, our bus drivers will be wearing masks and having the appropriate, if you will, gear to ensure that their safety. We are also asking and instructing all our passengers that are using our public services, whether it's the city hall or whether it's using a public transit system, to wear the appropriate, if you will, face masks so that we can keep everyone safe. The governor's instructions were to try and ensure that everyone in the community was aware that wearing face masks is really super important. It's part of why we're where we are as it relates to our flattening the curve. And so as our passengers are getting on buses, bus drivers will request that they put on a face mask so that they can obviously be safe on our bus system, etc. We will try and get some face masks as we can to help those that don't have them, but that'll be part of what we'll be doing as we open the service.
Okay.
All right, another question here from Chris McKee at KRQE. A question in regards to who is coming back to work. How is the city determining which workers will come back into facilities like City Hall and Plaza del Sol with only 25% capacity allowed?
So the question is, how are we deciding, who's coming back to work and when? And our CAO can really speak to that. Want to mention that by and large, the city, thousands of workers are already essential and working, right? So the majority of our workforce has had to continue working. So this question is an important question, but it's pursuant to, like 20% of the city's workforce only.
So we are making those decisions on a department by department basis because each department's operations are very different. In most departments, what we are envisioning is putting employees who need to return to City Hall on some sort of rotation so that will limit the exposure to other employees. So for example, if I'm coming in on Tuesdays with Alicia and Lawrence and Jesse, I would also come in on Thursday with Alicia, Lawrence, and Jesse so that if one of us were to get sick, we would know exactly who that other exposure has been to. Lawrence gave a great example of some of the tweaks we've made to allow remote dispatch in solid waste and planning and in code enforcement and environmental health. Those will stay in place as long as they're working. So there will be those remote dispatch places, workforce that will continue to be remotely dispatched. And then finally, if there are folks who are medically vulnerable or who are self-quarantining, of course, they will continue to work from home. There are some departments that are just easier to work from home, like legal, and those might come back in a little slower fashion just because that will leave room within our occupancy limits for guests and visitors to City Hall.
Okay, thank you. We have one more from Jessica Dyer at the Journal. How will the city enforce mask wearing at libraries, the biopark, etc.?
So the question is, how we enforce mask wearing at Biopark and in different facilities like this, libraries, et cetera. And I think, we're going to do it in step with the state. So we're just going to ask people, fundamentally, this is going to be about voluntary compliance. But we're going to ask people lots of times, and we're going to educate them. And as best that we can, we're going to try and have a mask available.
Nancy asked what should small business owners do if people come in without wearing a mask?
So the question from Nancy is, what should small business owners do if someone comes in without wearing a mask? Fundamentally, actually, I would really I would get an official answer from the state. I mean, the state is in charge of enforcement on this. And so, but I think asking nicely and being able to provide a mask is the best short answer. But again, for that, something specific like that, I would check with the state of New Mexico.
Okay, we have another question here from Chris McKee at KRQE. Do you have an expected opening date yet for Tingley Beach, the zoo, aquarium, and Botanic Garden?
A question is about opening date for zoo, Tingley, Botanic Garden, etc. And we do have an expected time frame. So Lawrence Rael can go into that. Yeah.
Oops, let me take this off again. Yes, we do have some expected dates on some of our facilities. Our libraries, our zoo, and will be for early in June. We're hopeful that the 2nd of June will start to open up. Tingley Beach, for example, a little more complicated because of the way the facility is, if you will, happened towards the end of the week of June. We'll actually, within the next couple of days, give out dates on facilities. First of June is right there, right? The head. There you go.
Special request from Chris McKee. You can hold up the building, keep it accurate for more June.
I do that question. Okay. Who made on that?
So you're doing another question just at the journal. Are the schools next week?
The question, pools and swimming. This is mapped out in the documents that we sent out Monday, so we're happy to provide those again. And Sarita can answer that question.
At the current time, the guidance of the state is not to reopen public pools. So as you'll see in that document, what it says is that we've given the green light on public pools. First activities that you'll see happening are reserved and that timed admission system where if there's things to do less than 6 people, will be able to make that clock reservation, and we'll work fully on distancing, making sure that the rooms and facilities are very clean, and gradually work our way back up to some of the more contact intensive things, swimming lessons and larger groups of swimmers.
More from Jessica Dyer. Have any city employees tested positive for COVID-19?
So the question is, I have tested positive for COVID-19. Can I think handle? We expect that because there's so many city employees. Two, that hundreds have been tested, and so we continue. We really want to find those as soon as possible.
Said it is. We have had just a handful of employees test positive for contact tracing. We've been able to find that, or all of them get to COVID through work, but who traveled internationally, and we're lucky to contain, not have spread the workforce. We're just going to have to be about to rapid for much of the PD operation, much of our far field operations. We're going to test, and text we was expedited people who are in our youth program because that is they're going to help as well.
We have in this will every receive somebody of its kind given the phone number.
About contact. They to give. Yeah. Right now, collecting all for information. Also, need is their name. That count from everyone. All right. So much is wrapping. We're excited to do one. So there's a lot of anxiety and frustration. But this thing for and our time and give Albuquerque to we can deliver the services that we're able most. And for tomorrow, it might change. A bit of a public topic. So much.